Have you ever heard the sound of children laughing in the middle of the woods, long after midnight, when you know for certain there are no children there? That's how the nightmare begins. And if you hear them, it may already be too late. It was early October when the group set out for their annual camping trip. The air carried that crisp bite of fall, sharp enough to make breath visible, but not so cold that it spoiled the fun. The group, 8 friends bound by years of shared work stress and weekend escapes, decided to leave behind the noise of the city and spend 2 nights deep in Ashwood Forest, a stretch of wilderness that was mostly avoided by locals. The forest wasn't listed on tourist maps anymore, but that was exactly what attracted them. Fewer people, more peace. They had rented 2 vans, packed them with tents, coolers, sleeping bags, and more alcohol than food, and drove for nearly 6 hours until the paved roads gave way to dirt and gravel. It was Beth, the group's unofficial planner, who spotted the clearing first. "Perfect," she said, pointing through the windshield as the tree line broke. The space was wide enough for multiple tents, the ground relatively even, and nearby, just beyond the ring of trees, a broken stone wall that looked like ruins. "Adds character," joked Marcus, ever the loud one of the group. He was the kind of man who whistled into silence just to make people groan. "We get free creepy aesthetic with our campsite." No one questioned the ruins at first. They looked like they might have belonged to an old cabin or barn, just crumbling stone blocks covered in vines. But if anyone had looked closer, they might have noticed that the wall wasn't the remains of a single building. It was the broken edge of something larger, a foundation that had once stretched far wider, now hidden beneath roots and undergrowth. By dusk, the tents were up, the fire was lit, and the laughter was loud enough to drown out the whispers of the woods. They grilled hot dogs, told old office gossip, teased each other about who snored the loudest. When Marcus produced a flask of whiskey and dared everyone to take a shot before telling a ghost story, the night's mood shifted. All right, said James, adjusting his glasses as if preparing for a lecture. He worked in IT and carried that quiet, bookish air that always made his stories sound more serious. "But you know the rule, no fake stories. It's gotta be real. Something you heard, or something that happened to you." The group agreed, half serious, half giddy. And one by one, stories were shared. Beth told of a hitchhiker on a deserted road who vanished when she looked back. Marcus, of course, exaggerated some nonsense about a graveyard dare gone wrong. Then it was Claire's turn. She had been quiet most of the night, sipping her drink slowly, eyes often darting toward the ruins. When the firelight caught her face, the others noticed she looked pale. "Okay, this isn't really my story," she began, voice hesitant. "But I remember my grandmother telling me something about Ashwood Forest. I didn't even realize it was here until we drove in today." The group leaned in, drawn by the sudden seriousness in her tone. "She said this forest used to have an orphanage. Ashwood Home for Children. It burned down in the 1950s, I think. No one knows exactly how, but the story goes that the kids were locked in their rooms when it happened. Some were trapped. Some never made it out." Claire swallowed, her eyes flicking to the ruined wall behind them. "They say on some nights, when it's quiet, you can hear them laughing, crying, calling out for someone they call Mother Ashwood." The fire crackled sharply at that moment, a burst of sparks spiraling upward. Everyone jumped a little, though Marcus forced a laugh to break the tension. "Well, cheers to creepy campfire timing," he said, raising his flask. But James frowned. "Ashwood Home," he repeated softly, like the name struck a bell in his memory. "That's not a story, Claire. That's real. I think I read about it once." A sudden cold breeze rustled through the trees, making the shadows of the branches dance along the tents. The group instinctively drew closer to the fire. "Look, it's just an old story," Beth said, forcing brightness into her voice. "We're fine. Nothing out here but us, the stars, and way too much whiskey." Everyone laughed, almost too loudly, almost too quickly, trying to shake off the weight of Claire's tale. But later, when the fire burned low and most of them had crawled into their tents, the first sound came. It was faint at first, high-pitched, carrying through the trees like a breeze. A child's laughter. Marcus sat up in his sleeping bag, frowning. He thought he'd dreamed it, but then it came again. Closer this time. He glanced toward the others' tents, shadows shifting faintly inside as if others were awake too. Then he heard it again, this time followed by the sound of someone crying. A soft, whimpering sob. The laughter and the crying overlapped, weaving together in the stillness of the forest. And for the first time that night, Marcus didn't feel like joking. Marcus lay frozen in his tent, the thin nylon walls suddenly feeling paper-thin against the night. The sound of the laughter twisted unnaturally, high and sweet one second, low and drawn out the next, as if more than one child was hiding among the trees. And that crying, God, it wasn't steady. It came in waves, sharp gasps between sobs, the sound of a child utterly alone. He unzipped the flap just enough to peek outside. The fire had burned down to embers, glowing red like half-shut eyes. The trees beyond swayed, branches scratching against each other, their movements whispering like voices. The sound carried with them, drifting closer and then further, circling the camp. Beth, he hissed, but his voice barely broke above a whisper. Her tent shifted. Then James's. One by one, sleepy but uneasy faces poked out. Claire didn't even bother, she was already outside, her jacket thrown on over her pajamas, standing rigid as a statue near the fire pit. You hear it too, she whispered, eyes locked on the tree-line. No one answered, but the silence was enough. They all heard it. Beth tried to force a laugh, her breath visible in the sudden chill. It's gotta be some kids from town. Maybe they came out here to screw with us. Locals prank campers all the time, right? But James shook his head. His glasses reflected the dim glow of the coals, his expression grim. There is no town nearby. Closest settlement is 15 miles south. And no parents would let their kids run around out here after midnight. The crying swelled again, this time so close Marcus swore it came from just beyond the ruined wall. He stood, flashlight trembling in his grip. Screw this, I'm checking it out. Wait. Claire grabbed his arm. Her fingers were ice cold. Don't answer them. What? My grandmother, she said if you answer, they'll know you can hear them. The group exchanged uneasy looks, torn between superstition and reason. Marcus, never one to let fear show, yanked his arm free. It's just some brat playing games. Watch. He clicked on his flashlight and shouted toward the ruins. Hey! Who's out there? This isn't funny. The forest fell silent. The laughter stopped mid-giggle, the crying cut off as though someone had pressed a mute button on the night. The air grew heavy, dense with a pressure that made ears ring and skin crawl. Even the crickets went quiet. Then, so faint it could almost have been imagined, a whisper floated back. We found him. Claire's face drained of color. She stumbled back, clutching her chest. Oh God. Oh no, no, no. Marcus's flashlight flickered violently, then steadied. He swung it across the ruins, his bravado faltering. The beam landed on something pale between the trees, a face, just for an instant, eyes too wide, too reflective. Then it vanished. Did you see that? He hissed, voice cracking. James stepped forward, his rational mind fighting against his body's rising panic. Okay, listen, maybe it's an animal. Light reflecting in the eyes. Could have been a deer. That wasn't a deer, Claire whispered. That was a child. The group gathered tighter around the dying embers, the fire no longer feeling like protection but like a beacon calling to whatever watched from the dark. Then, without warning, a sound tore through the silence, Beth's phone ringing inside her tent. The shrill tone was almost absurd in the thick tension, but when she lunged inside to grab it, her hands went slack. The caller ID read, Unknown, Mother. Everyone crowded around, staring in disbelief. Answer it, Marcus whispered, though his own voice trembled. Beth shook her head violently, thumb hovering over the decline button. But before she could press it, the phone stopped ringing. Silence again. Then, from somewhere deep in the woods, a chorus of children's voices rose. Dozens of them, echoing together in sickly harmony. "Mother's coming." The flames hissed as if drowned by invisible water. The fire went out completely, plunging the group into utter darkness. And from that darkness, footsteps, small, rapid, circling the camp. Panic erupted in the dark. Beth fumbled with her lighter, striking it again and again as the sound of tiny footsteps darted through the underbrush. Marcus cursed under his breath, swinging his dim flashlight in frantic arcs, its beams slicing the blackness in jagged streaks. "Get the fire back up!" James barked, his voice tight with fear. "Hurry!" Beth's lighter finally caught, a weak flame dancing against her trembling hand. She shoved it toward the pile of damp logs, but the fire refused to take, sputtering out with a hiss. It was as though the wood itself rejected the flame. "Why won't it light?" Beth gasped. It was burning fine before." "Move!" Marcus grabbed the lighter, but his efforts fared no better. The flame barely touched the kindling before dying as though suffocated by unseen hands. Claire stood apart from the frenzy, staring at the ruins. Her lips moved silently, her eyes wide and wet with terror. She whispered to herself, repeating something like a prayer, or maybe a warning. "Claire, help us!" Beth snapped, desperation cracking her voice. But Claire only shook her head slowly. "She doesn't want the fire." A sudden, sharp cry cut through the camp, a child's scream, so close it made every nerve in their bodies jolt. Marcus swung his flashlight toward the ruins. The beam fell on what looked like a doorway, half collapsed, hidden in vines and moss. For just a second, the outline of a figure stood there. Small. Thin. Its face white as bone. Then it vanished into the black. Was that a kid? James whispered, though his tone carried no real question. "Kids don't move like that," Marcus muttered, his hand trembling against the flashlight. The footsteps grew bolder now, circling wider, closing in. And above them, layered through the laughter and sobbing, came a new sound, an adult's voice, low and smooth, humming a lullaby. The tune was sickly sweet, drifting across the clearing with a calmness that froze the blood in their veins. Claire clapped her hands over her ears. "It's her," she cried. "It's Mother Ashwood." The name seemed to ripple through the trees. The humming grew louder, and with it came a heavy odor, like burned wood and rotting cloth. James, his rational instincts overwhelmed, pointed toward the ruins. "We need to leave. Now. Grab your stuff and head back to the vans." But as they scrambled for their bags, Marcus's flashlight beam caught something carved into the largest stone block of the ruins. Letters, faded but still visible. Ashwood Home for Children, 1913. Beneath the words, the stone was blackened, streaked as though scarred by fire. James's stomach dropped. "This is it. This is where it happened." The laughter rose into a frenzy, echoing through the trees, bouncing off every surface until it seemed to come from all directions at once. Then, without warning, the footsteps stopped. Dead silence. The group froze, their breath shallow, their hearts thundering. Marcus slowly swept his flashlight across the clearing. At first, nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Then the beam landed on the stone doorway again. This time, it wasn't empty. A line of children stood in the shadows of the ruins. 6, maybe 7 of them. Their clothes were ragged, their skin pale, their eyes glinting with an unnatural sheen. Some smiled. Others wept. One raised a hand and pointed directly at the group. Beth let out a strangled cry, stumbling backward. "Oh my God, oh my God." The humming swelled into a song now, words forming beneath the lullaby. "Come home, little ones. Mother's waiting. Come home." And in that moment, Marcus realized something that made his blood run cold. The children weren't pointing at them. They were pointing past them. Toward the tents. From inside one of the tents, Claire's, came the sound of a child's voice. Soft. Fragile. Calling out. "Mommy? Can I come out now?" For a moment, no one breathed. The voice from inside Claire's tent was soft, trembling with that unmistakable innocence of a child. Yet it wasn't Claire's. "Mommy," it repeated, barely louder than the rustle of leaves. "Can I come out now?" Claire stumbled backward until she collided with James. Her eyes were wide, her hands shaking uncontrollably. That's not me. That's not me in there." Marcus's flashlight trembled as he aimed the beam at the tent. The thin fabric glowed in the light, and sure enough, a silhouette appeared within. Small. Too small to belong to any of them. It shifted, swaying slightly, as though the child inside was rocking on their heels. Beth's voice cracked, shrill with terror. "Who the hell is in there?" The silhouette moved closer to the flap, and a tiny hand pressed against the fabric from inside. The material bulged outward beneath the pressure, fingers splayed, leaving the impression of long, thin digits. "Open the tent," Marcus said hoarsely. James whipped around to glare at him. "Are you insane? If it's some kid, if some poor kid stuck out here, we can't just..." But before he could finish, the zipper of the tent began to move on its own. The slow rasp of metal teeth separating filled the silence, dragging down inch by inch. Everyone froze, their eyes locked on that sliding zipper, unable to intervene. Claire clutched her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "Don't answer them, don't let them out," she whispered, repeating the words like a mantra. The zipper stopped halfway. The flap trembled, as though something inside was deciding whether or not to emerge. Then, with a sudden lurch, it was thrown wide open. The child that stepped out wasn't entirely wrong. At first glance, it looked like a boy of maybe 7 or 8. He wore tattered pajamas, the fabric charred at the edges as though singed in a fire. His hair hung in ashy clumps, and his skin was waxy pale. But it was his eyes that broke them, round, glossy, reflecting the firelight like dark glass marbles. He smiled, and the expression stretched too far across his face. "Mother said you'd come," the boy whispered. His voice was clear, strong, and yet it seemed to echo unnaturally, like several voices speaking in unison. The group stumbled back, the circle of friends fracturing into raw fear. Marcus swung the flashlight at the boy, but instead of shrinking away, the child took a step forward. Behind him, from the ruins, the other children laughed. The sound was shrill and overlapping, each voice cutting into the next until it became unbearable. James grabbed Claire by the wrist and yanked her back toward the vans. "We're leaving. Now." But when they turned toward the dirt road, their stomachs sank, the way back had vanished. The trail they had driven in on was swallowed by trees, as though the forest itself had shifted in the night. This isn't possible," Beth stammered. We came from right there." "Mother doesn't let anyone leave," the boy whispered. His glassy eyes shimmered with reflected fire. She keeps us all." Suddenly, the boy's smile collapsed, replaced by a look of anguish. His lips trembled. His voice broke into sobs. "Please, help us, she's burning us, she's burning." He convulsed, his small frame jerking unnaturally. Then, just as quickly, the smile returned, smooth and wide. His voice steadied. "But we're not alone anymore." At that moment, the other children in the ruins began to move. Slowly, in unison, they stepped forward from the doorway, their bare feet making no sound against the earth. Their eyes gleamed, their whispers rising in a single chant. "Mother's here. Mother's here. Mother's here." The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of scorched wood. Somewhere above the trees, a shadow began to stretch across the stars, blotting them out one by one. And then they heard it, the long, dragging footsteps of something much larger than a child, moving closer with every second. The footsteps echoed through the forest like the groan of shifting earth, slow, deliberate, impossibly heavy. Each impact made the ground tremble beneath their boots, sending vibrations through their legs, as if the soil itself remembered something ancient and terrible. The children fell silent all at once. Their chant, "Mother's here," snapped into an unnatural hush, leaving only the rasping breath of the wind in the blackened trees. Dozens of glassy eyes turned upward, faces glowing faintly in the firelight, all tilted toward the ruins. Marcus whispered through clenched teeth, We run. Now. Before. But then the ruins stirred. The charred timbers of the orphanage groaned, sagging inward as though something beneath the earth pushed against them. Ash rose in soft spirals, swirling unnaturally, gathering instead of dispersing. Within seconds, the ruins were breathing, exhaling clouds of soot that drifted into the night air like smoke from a long-dead fire. Beth gripped James's arm so tightly her nails dug into his skin. "Oh my God. It's her." The shape took form slowly, impossibly. First a long, skeletal hand pressed through the ash, blackened bones wrapped in paper-thin skin. Then another, clawing up through the ruins like roots breaking through soil. A towering figure began to rise, formed not of flesh but of charred timber, caked ash, and brittle bone. Her head bent at an unnatural angle, her hair a cascade of soot drifting down her hollow face. The children dropped to their knees in unison, whispering through their cracked lips. "Mother Ashwood. Mother Ashwood." The group backed away until their heels hit the vans, nowhere left to retreat. Claire clutched her stomach, sobbing, whispering, "It's not real. It's not real. It's not real." Mother Ashwood's head turned toward them, and when she opened her mouth, it wasn't a scream or a growl but the sound of dozens of children crying at once. A chorus of anguish, the cries of the lost. James, shaking but defiant, raised a fallen branch like a weapon. "Stay the hell away from us." The figure stilled. Slowly, her head tilted toward him, bone cracking with the motion. Her sunken eyes, hollow pits glowing faintly orange, like embers, fixed on him. And then she spoke. "You left them." The words weren't directed at James alone. They stabbed into all of them, heavy with accusation. The children around the ruins echoed it in a sing-song whisper. "You left us. You left us. You left us." Claire screamed and covered her ears. Beth broke down into sobs, whispering apologies to no one. Marcus gritted his teeth, forcing his voice to steady. "We didn't do anything to you. We're not part of this." But Mother Ashwood only leaned closer, her skeletal frame bending in impossible ways. Her mouth opened wider, wider still, until it stretched like a black wound across her face. "You will be." The children began to rise again, their bodies jerking as though pulled by invisible strings. Their smiles widened, and they moved forward, closing in around the group. The forest itself seemed to tighten, the trees bending inward like prison bars. The path out was gone, swallowed by the night. And then, without warning, one of the children lunged. It wasn't a scream this time. It was a laugh, shrill and gleeful, as his small hands clawed for Beth's throat. Beth stumbled back with a shriek as the boy's small hands clawed at her throat. His strength was unnatural, far too much for a child his size, and his eyes glowed faintly with the same ember-like light that burned in Mother Ashwood's hollow sockets. James swung the branch in a desperate arc, striking the boy across the head. The crack echoed in the clearing, and the child dropped instantly, yet there was no blood, no cry of pain. His body collapsed into ash, crumbling like burned paper, only to scatter into the air before their horrified eyes. Beth gasped, trembling. "Oh my God. I didn't mean." But the moment the ash drifted into the ruins, the towering figure of Mother Ashwood shuddered and straightened, as though feeding on the fragments. The hollow pits of her eyes glowed brighter, embers swelling into faint flames. Her laughter wasn't hers alone, it carried the shrill giggles of dozens of children. Marcus cursed under his breath. "Killing them makes her stronger." The others froze, horror dawning in their expressions. Around them, the other children advanced, their little feet dragging across the earth, their faces twisted in grins too wide to be human. Each whisper echoed the same word. "Mother. Mother. Mother." James raised his makeshift weapon again but hesitated. The weight of the realization pressed down on him. Every blow, Every desperate attempt to survive was nothing but an offering. Claire clung to Marcus, shaking uncontrollably. "We can't fight them. We can't even run. What do we do?" Marcus scanned the ruins, his chest heaving. Something in his eyes hardened. "She's bound to this place. That's why she's never left. If we want to survive," he swallowed, the idea forming even as he spoke it. "We burn it again. Burn the ruins. Starve her." The suggestion sent a ripple of dread through the group. The ruins themselves seemed to respond, groaning angrily as if the spirit within them understood. The ash in the air thickened, swirling faster. Mother Ashwood's skeletal frame stretched higher, her voice splitting into two tones, one deep and guttural, the other shrill and childlike. "You will not leave me." The children surged all at once. Their laughter warped into shrieks as they rushed forward in a wave. James swung again, this time not at the children but at the fire pit, scattering embers across the dry ground. The flames lit the earth hungrily, catching on brittle roots and dry leaves. Beth grabbed one of the lanterns, smashing it against a timber beam of the orphanage. The glass shattered, kerosene spilling, and the wood erupted in flame. Mother Ashwood screamed, and it wasn't the sound of one voice but hundreds, children crying, laughing, wailing in anguish. The children surrounding them faltered, their movements jerking violently, some collapsing into heaps of ash before they could even reach the group. The forest roared with the sound of fire. The flames climbed higher, consuming what was left of the orphanage. For a moment, the group thought they had found their salvation. But then, in the heart of the inferno, Mother Ashwood stepped forward, her charred frame walking through the fire untouched, the embers now part of her body. She was no longer bound to the ruins, she had become the fire itself. Beth's voice cracked with despair. "We've made her worse." And as the towering figure turned its burning eyes upon them, the forest filled once more with the sound of children, laughing, crying, calling for mother. The night sky above the ruins bled with firelight, clouds thickening into a suffocating shroud that blotted out the stars. The orphanage timbers collapsed inward, sending sparks spiraling into the air, but Mother Ashwood did not burn. Her towering frame wavered in the fire, smoke trailing from her limbs like veins, and the children's voices echoed in her every step. "Run!" Marcus barked, shoving Claire forward. He didn't need to say it twice. The group tore away from the clearing, plunging into the woods. Their lungs burned as much from smoke as from panic, their feet slamming against the earth with reckless speed. The fire lit the trees behind them, casting long shadows that stretched like clawed hands across the forest floor. Beth stumbled, nearly collapsing, but James caught her arm and hauled her forward. "Don't stop. Just keep moving." But no matter how far they ran, the sounds followed them, the patter of small feet, laughter that seemed to dart from tree to tree, the shrill whisper of voices calling their names. The woods bent around them unnaturally, every direction seeming to lead deeper instead of out. Claire's voice broke in a sob. We should have been at the road by now. We should have been out." Marcus slowed just enough to glance around. His jaw clenched as realization hit him. "She's twisting the woods. Keeping us in." The forest itself seemed to respond, groaning with the sound of ancient timbers bending. The trees shifted, their branches curling toward the group like skeletal arms. One tree in their path split with a loud crack, its trunk peeling open unnaturally, as if forming a gaping mouth. Inside, the hollow pulsed faintly with an ember glow. "Keep away from it!" James shouted, pulling the group to the side. But as they passed, the sound of children's laughter erupted from within the hollow, echoing mockingly. Beth clutched her chest, tears streaking through the soot on her cheeks. "It's everywhere. She's everywhere." Marcus stopped abruptly, forcing the others to nearly collide into him. His eyes locked on a faint light ahead, a flicker not of fire, but of lanterns. "There!" Through the trees, a faint trail opened, leading toward what looked like a cabin half hidden by brush. Its windows glowed with the weak yellow of lantern light, and for the first time since the nightmare began, something human-like appeared. The group surged toward it, hope sparking in their exhausted hearts. They burst through the clearing, pounding on the cabin door. "Help us!" Beth screamed. "Please, open the door!" The latch creaked, and slowly, the door swung inward. An old man stood in the shadows, his face half-lit by the glow of a lantern. His eyes were sunken, his skin weathered and pale, and his voice rasped like dry leaves. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. James shoved forward. "Please, you don't understand. We're being hunted." The man raised a trembling hand, silencing him. "I know what hunts you. She's been here long before you. Long before me. The children serve her. They always have." The cabin walls creaked as though in response, and for the first time, the group noticed the carvings etched into the wood, strange runes and symbols scorched into every beam. Claire's voice trembled. "What is this place?" The man's eyes flickered to her, then back to the door. "A ward. A cage. It holds her back, but only for a time." He stepped aside, motioning for them to enter. "If you want to live, you'll need to hear the truth about Mother Ashwood." The group exchanged terrified glances. Outside, the laughter swelled again, pressing closer. Inside, the cabin's protection felt fragile but real. Marcus pushed everyone in and shut the door behind them, the heavy latch clanging shut. For the first time since night fell, there was silence, thick, suffocating, but absent of the children's voices. Only the crackle of the lantern filled the room. And then the old man spoke again, his words heavy with dread. "She was not always what you see now. She was once a mother to the lost children of this forest. But when the orphanage burned, the children called for her, and something answered. Something that wears her shape. She's been feeding ever since. On them. On you. On anyone foolish enough to step into Ashwood." The group's blood ran cold. And then, as if to punctuate his words, the walls of the cabin shuddered violently. Outside, Mother Ashwood's voice carried across the forest, deeper and louder than before. "You cannot hide them from me." The lantern sputtered. The carvings on the walls seemed to glow faintly. And the old man's face twisted with sorrow. "She knows you now. And once she knows you, there is no escape." The cabin seemed to shrink around them as the old man's words sank in. The flickering lantern threw jagged shadows across the carved walls, the protective symbols glowing faintly like embers in the dark. The group stood frozen, each of them struggling to breathe as though the air itself had turned to ash. Beth finally broke the silence, her voice trembling. What do you mean no escape? We just have to wait until daylight, right? The sun will drive her back." The old man's sunken eyes lingered on her, pity etched deep in his weathered face. He shook his head slowly. "The sun doesn't touch her. This is her place. Her domain. She is the forest, the ashes, the laughter and the trees. Daylight only hides her face, it does not banish her." Claire's legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed into a chair by the wall, gripping her temples. No. There has to be a way. There has to be a way out." The man exhaled, his voice cracking like a dry branch. "There is only one way. The same way it has always been." The lantern flickered again, and in that moment of near darkness, his eyes seemed to glint with something both haunted and resigned. "One must be given. Willingly. Mother Ashwood demands a child, but when there are none, she takes the next closest thing, a soul young enough, still full of fear. If one of you offers yourselves, the rest may leave." The words hit like a thunderclap. The group erupted all at once. "Absolutely not." James's voice was sharp, defiant. "We're not sacrificing anyone." Beth's chest heaved, her breath shallow. "You can't be serious. You're saying, one of us, has to die?" The old man lowered his gaze. "It is not death." His lips trembled as he spoke. "It is worse. They become her child. Her servant. The forest will keep them forever. Their laughter will join hers." The cabin trembled suddenly, dust falling from the rafters. From outside came the sound of dozens of tiny fists pounding against the walls, children's voices shrieking in eerie unison. Mother wants you. Mother needs you. Mother loves you. Claire let out a strangled sob, covering her ears as if it might block out the sound. James gritted his teeth and turned on the old man. If you knew this, why didn't you warn us sooner? Why let us come here at all? The man's hollow eyes met his, and for the first time, his voice cracked with anguish. Because you wouldn't have believed me. No one ever does. Not until it's too late. Marcus, who had been quiet, finally spoke, his voice low and cold. So what, you're saying we have to choose? We pick someone to throw to her, and the rest get to live? The old man nodded once. Or she will take all of you. Piece by piece. The words hung in the air like poison. Beth backed away, her eyes wide with horror. No. No. We're not doing that. There has to be another way. We can fight her. We can. Her protest was cut short as the lantern flame suddenly died, plunging the cabin into darkness. The protective symbols on the walls glowed faintly, but the pounding outside grew louder, the children's voices pressing in from every angle. And then, above them all, Mother Ashwood's voice rose, guttural and filled with rage. Choose. Or I will choose for you. The cabin groaned, its walls bending inward as though the forest itself was trying to swallow it whole. Claire screamed, covering her head. James grabbed Beth and Marcus, pulling them close. The group's frantic eyes met in the dark, terror mirrored in each gaze. And for the first time, the horrible truth dawned on them: survival might come at the cost of betrayal. The cabin walls strained against the pounding fists and shrill cries, each impact rattling through the group's bones. In the dark, faces flickered pale in the glow of the faintly burning runes, each of them caught in the same horrific realization. They had been given an impossible choice, and every second they delayed brought them closer to being swallowed whole. James pressed his back to the wall, his knuckles white around the broken chair leg he still clutched as a weapon. His jaw clenched tight. We're not doing this. Nobody here is going to choose. We fight. All of us together. Beth's eyes shimmered with tears. And fight what, James? Shadows? Ghost children? That thing out there? Her voice cracked as her fears spilled into anger. We couldn't even fight off a boy. He crumbled into ash. Marcus cut in, his tone razor sharp. She said one of us. Just one. You really want to gamble all our lives just to cling to some fantasy of survival? Claire's head snapped up, her voice trembling but filled with fury. Don't you dare. Don't you dare start looking at us like that. We've been through everything together, we are not sacrificing one of our own. But even as she spoke, her gaze betrayed her. It lingered too long on Marcus, then shifted to Beth, and James saw it. Saw the suspicion. The fear. It was spreading like wildfire through the group. And then the whispers began. Not from outside. From inside. Beth's head jerked, her eyes widening. A voice, soft and sweet, spilled into her mind, a child's voice. You don't have to die, Beth. Not if you give them. She'll take the others. She'll spare you. You'll live. She gasped, pressing her hands over her ears, but the voice burrowed deeper, impossible to silence. Across the room, Marcus stiffened. His lips trembled as though answering someone unseen. Choose now, a girl's voice whispered in his mind, sing-song and cruel. Point to the one. Just point. We'll take them away, and you'll be free. Claire let out a sharp cry, clutching her temples. Stop it. Stop whispering. James turned to her, panic in his voice. What? Who's whispering? Claire's voice cracked, breaking under the pressure. The children. They're inside my head. They're saying we have to give someone or they'll come in here, and she broke off, sobbing. Beth's voice rose, shrill with terror. I can't do this anymore. One of us has to go. The group froze at her words, every gaze snapping toward her. For the first time, silence fell, save for the faint giggles outside, as though the children delighted in the fracture forming inside the cabin. Marcus's voice dropped, low and dangerous. "Then who, Beth? Who do you think should go?" Her lips trembled. She didn't answer. The whispers grew louder, circling the group, each voice coaxing, tempting. "You could live. Just give us one. Point to the weak one. Point, and we'll take them. You'll be safe." James slammed his fist into the wall, shouting over the voices. "Shut up! Shut up, all of you!" His chest heaved as he looked at each of them in turn. His friends. His family. And now, potential executioners. Claire's hands dropped from her ears. Her face was pale, wet with tears, but her eyes were hard. "We need to decide. If we don't, she's going to kill us all." The words hung like a death sentence. Beth sobbed uncontrollably. Marcus stared at her with something unreadable. James shook his head violently, refusing to let go of hope. And outside, the children's laughter swelled, filling the forest with cruel anticipation, as though they knew the group was already breaking apart. And then, for the first time, Mother Ashwood herself spoke, not through rage, not through command, but through a voice almost gentle, almost motherly. "My darlings, only one of you needs to be mine. Choose, and I will love the rest of you forever." The lantern flared to life suddenly, bathing the cabin in pale light. Their faces glowed in its flicker, eyes wild, breaths shallow, every bond of friendship unraveling. The cabin had become a cage of suspicion, and one way or another, someone was about to be given to her. The lantern's pale flame quivered, painting each of their faces in trembling light. Beth sobbed into her hands, Claire rocked silently in the chair, Marcus stood rigid by the door, and James gripped his makeshift weapon like it was the only thing tethering him to reality. The whispers hadn't stopped, they only grew sweeter, more persuasive, their words dripping like poison honey. "You'll survive, Beth. Just give them. Point to Marcus. Point to Claire. She'll take them away, and you'll be safe. Marcus, you've always been the strongest. The leader. They'd never survive without you. Give us Beth. She's already breaking. Claire, you've been forgotten before, haven't you? Left behind? This time, you can be the one who lives." James heard none of it. Only the sound of his friend's ragged breaths, the silence between each word. His eyes darted, searching, calculating, while his mind screamed against the horror unraveling around them. Finally, Marcus snapped. His voice was low, guttural, stripped of patience. "If we don't choose, we all die. That's the truth, isn't it?" He looked at the old man in the corner, who sat slumped, eyes shadowed. "Tell me I'm wrong." The old man didn't move. Didn't answer. His silence was damning. Marcus's jaw tightened. He turned to Beth. "Then it has to be her." Beth's head jerked up, her face streaked with tears. "What? No. How can you?" "You said it yourself," Marcus cut in coldly. "You can't do this anymore. You've already given up." Beth's sob broke into a scream. "You bastard." James lunged between them, shoving Marcus back. "We're not doing this." But as he said it, something deep in the old man's silence clicked in his mind. James froze, his chest heaving, his thoughts racing back to every word the man had said. One must be given. Willingly. James's grip loosened on the chair leg. His eyes widened as a realization took hold. Slowly, he turned on the old man. "It doesn't have to be one of us, does it?" The old man lifted his head. His expression was empty, hollow. James's voice rose, frantic. "You've been here all along. You knew what she wanted. You led us to this cabin. To her. You were the one meant to be given. Not us." The room froze. Beth's sobs fell silent, Claire's shaking stilled, Marcus's glare broke into shock. The old man's face cracked, not with fear, but with something darker. A smile. It spread across his weathered features slowly, like a mask revealing its true shape. "You're clever," he rasped, his voice shifting. Not frail, not weak, low and cruel, with the echo of children's laughter woven into it. Cleverer than the others. The protective runes on the walls flared, then blackened all at once, the light snuffed out. The cabin groaned violently, the walls splintering as if something inside pressed outward. Beth shrieked. Marcus swore under his breath. Claire clutched her head as if it might burst. The old man stood, taller now, his spine stretching unnaturally. His eyes glowed faintly red, like embers fanned to flame. His voice boomed, layered with dozens of children's voices. "There never was a choice. You were always hers. I am her herald. I bring her children home." The walls exploded inward, and Mother Ashwood herself loomed, her charred frame filling the cabin, her ember eyes blazing with triumph. James shoved Beth and Claire toward the shattered back wall. "Run!" The forest opened before them, but it was no longer the forest they knew, every tree twisted into skeletal shapes, every hollow glowing with ember light, every whisper carrying laughter. The woods were no longer woods. They were her body. Beth stumbled forward, screaming. Marcus dragged Claire after him. James ran last, but his mind spun with the truth: there had never been an escape. The ferry, the trails, the ruins, everything led here. Ashwood wasn't a place. It was a trap. The whispers surged all at once, pressing into their minds, their hearts, their bones. And one by one, they faltered. Beth screamed as invisible hands dragged her into the trees, her cry cut short by laughter. Marcus swung wildly at shadows before he, too, was pulled into the dark. Claire's sobs echoed, fading, then gone. James ran until his lungs tore, until the laughter was all around him, until the ground beneath him gave way. He collapsed into ash. The forest closed in. And in the end, there was silence. Only the sound of children's faint giggles drifting through the trees. The ruins still stood, waiting for the next group. And in the dark, Mother Ashwood whispered with tender affection, a promise carried on the wind. "The children are never gone. They only come home."